All right. Well, we're going to get started. It's 9 o'clock my time, which we want to start on time, not late. So we're going to go ahead and kick off this session. Um, what I'm working on here today on teaching you is the idea of setting audacious goals, right? And the idea of an audacious goal is something that's really going to drive your organization forward with purpose and conviction and alignment. And there's a lot of techniques to go doing this. We're going to cover one technique for figuring out how you can go ahead and generate a big, hairy, audacious goal, or otherwise known as a BHAG. So I'm George Morris. I'm a certified scaling up coach and implementer. Um, Clients are all over the board from $1 million to 130 million in revenue. Been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years, and former president of EO Colorado. Also, father of 2 kids. That's where I get the gray hairs from. So today's workshop is really going to be focused on the book that was created by this guy here, Jim Collins. Many people know who Jim Collins is. When he wrote Good to Great, he introduced the concept of a BHAG, or big, hairy, audacious goal. I find that a lot of times my clients could really go without the big hairy and they'll just leave it as audacious goal, which is perfectly fine. The concept is what actually matters here. And when you look at what Jim Collins had to write, it's the power of a BHAG. That is, it gets you out of thinking too small. A great BHAG changes the time frame and simultaneously creates a sense of urgency. It's a real paradox. So the key thing that I like to focus on here is the highlight. It gets you out of thinking small, because there's problems with the goals that most people set. When you look at most goals, they're too small. They're achievable by continuing doing what you're doing. You're looking for incremental growth. If you get 15%, 20% growth, that's incremental growth. People are used to achieving those things. Therefore, it's not exciting, and it won't inspire the team to change or think bigger. And therefore, you won't develop the grit within the organization. So the idea is to create something that is challenging enough that it's reasonable to think that you're probably not going to hit it, but there is a chance that you can hit it. And I've heard different numbers thrown around through the possibility of creating a BHAG that is attainable. And I personally like to go with 30 to 40% chance that you're actually going to hit it. Some people have said 60% chance. I think that's too high. Aim bigger. And when you're thinking about a BHAG, I would encourage you to think like these guys here as an example. The man on the left here is David Goggins. He is a former Navy SEAL. He's also an Army Ranger. He's one of the first men ever to achieve the title of both of those things. And currently, he is an ultra marathon runner. And the man can run, the Moab, what was it, the Moab 290, so 290 miles of running. He's setting these audacious goals that don't seem humanly possible. What Goggins has is a BHAG, a personal BHAG, is to be the world's toughest man. And I'd argue that he's on course to do that. And when you're thinking about a BHAG, you set it big, something that other people just say, you're just out of your mind in terms of thinking of doing that. Elon Musk pops up here. So Elon Musk has the mission to get humans to Mars by 2035. Actually, heard he bumped that number up a little bit. He doesn't have a great record of actually hitting his goals on time. But you know what? The guy has hit his goals. He's created SpaceX. He's done Solar City. He's done Tesla. PayPal was a pretty good win. So when you think about thinking bigger, look at something like Elon Musk when he's thinking about going to Mars as a great example. Not all of us can cure cancer or go to Mars, but you want to think bigger. That's the idea of the BHAG. And my favorite example that I think really hits home with most people on this one is Kennedy and the idea about sending a human to the moon and returning them safely to Earth. And when you think about the BHAG around Kennedy's statement that we're going to go to the moon, I like to illustrate it this way. If you look at it, in 1903, it was the Wright brothers' first flight. We were just trying to figure out how to fly. And back in, was it 1780, I believe it was, is when we had the first human in the air with the hot air balloon. Let me turn on the captioning here. The first one to get to the hot air balloon was in 1780 or whatever. And it took over 100 years before we could get off the ground with the Wright brothers. And then it was another 11 years after that we had the first commercial flight. And not to almost 36 years later, did we have the first nonstop transatlantic flight. So all this time's gone by, 60 years of time it takes for us to go from our first flight on the Earth into getting someone up into space. But then in 1962, Kennedy comes out and says, we're going to send someone to the moon. And you got to think about it here. The first human in space was 1961, which is just a year earlier. He's saying by the end of the decade, we're going to get someone up there. 1969, we put someone up on the moon. That's a course of about an 8-year period from when he said that, 7 to 8 year period from when he made that statement till we went up on the moon. And a lot of people looked at him and said, not possible. There's no way we're going to get someone up to the moon in the decade. And if you also look at it, if he missed getting us to the moon, right? He was dead by the time this actually happened. But if this failed, the effort failed altogether, we would still get all these byproducts from the BHAG going to the moon. We got the Saturn V rocket. We created all these new materials, alloys, heat-resistant materials, glass that withstands heat and impact. We got a GPS system up out of it. And my personal favorite is right here, Tang. You know, we got Tang as a breakfast drink out of the moon, out of the attempt to go to the moon. So when you think bigger, it causes you to create all these systems around us. I got a true on the Tang. Yes, it is. It's the best. I haven't had it in a long time, but it's best. Second to Sunny D. Anyway, going to the moon creates all these other byproducts. So when you're thinking of the BHAG, you have to scale your organization in a way that lets you hit that BHAG. You're going to get byproducts that are going to benefit the organization. Another example I love to talk about when it comes to setting these high aspirations. This one is a much shorter time frame. And I know with BHAGs, the common thinking is 20 to 25 years out. I wrestle with that. You know, when you're looking at an ambitious goal, you can set an ambitious goal that's on a shorter time frame if you're going to put the effort and focus into it. But when it comes to an organization, thinking bigger over a decade or so is a healthy exercise to get the organization growing beyond that capacity. But in this case, I want to highlight Bantam Car Company. So this is a story I don't think too many people know. This vehicle here is a Jeep, but it wasn't created by GM and it wasn't created by Ford. It was created by the Bantam Car Company. So it happened in World War II. The US military knew that we were kind of needing a vehicle to go into combat to go against the Germans in the Blitzkrieg. So it needed to be dropped from an aircraft. It needed to be serviceable in the field with a wrench and a hammer. It needed to be able to be fixable by anybody that was within the vehicle. It also needed to be in multiple configurations and very nimble through the tight trails of Europe. And so they put this RFP out there, the military, and they wanted to get prototypes in the next 49 days. So they had a very short timetable. They sent out the request to Ford, they sent the request out to Willys Overland, and they sent the request out to Bantam Car Company. So Ford and Willys brought these giant vehicles in that were kind of modified versions of what they currently had. The Bantam Car Company out of Pennsylvania had a team of maybe 6 or 7 guys at the time. They went to a junkyard and they created this Frankenstein, which is the Jeep. So they thought completely innovatively around this, and they delivered the military a Jeep in 49 days as a prototype. And that was that's a company with a very tight BHAG. So I want to show you here that you can set BHAGs that are pretty short. You don't always have to go multi-decade. The sad part of this story is when the military chose the design, they loved Bantam Car Company, but they were such a small outfit that there was no way they were going to be able to generate the Jeeps they needed for World War II. So they stole the blueprints. The military took the blueprints because they had the right to do it under wartime, and they gave it to Willys and they gave it to Ford to create the Jeeps. It kind of sucks for Bantam, but it's a cool story. Going back to Collins here, building a visionary company requires 1% vision and 99% alignment. So it's not so much creating the vision creation part is with work, it can be done. It's really a matter of getting alignment. I also, I have a statement or question here. Give me one second. I love how BHAG grows people as much as growing the organization, chain reaction, ripple effect. It pushes people to expand on individual level first, stepping outside their comfort zone, which by extension grows the company. That was a statement one of the participants put up here, and I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly why we have a BHAG. Again, if you got questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. I'll jump to them if I see them pop up on my screen. So let's go through and talk about that alignment piece. So BHAGs show up in a couple different systems. I coach scaling up. There's also EOS traction that calls for BHAGs, and Metronome has the 3HAG method, which is in alignment with BHAGs. You set your BHAG, then you set your 3HAG. That's kind of how they look at it. But when you're thinking about the BHAG, think of it as the top of the pyramid. And then everything cascades down from there. So after you have a BHAG, then you can generate long-term goals. Within those long-term goals, think maybe yearly goals. And then you have your quarterly rocks. How are you taking the bigger piece, which is the elephant, and breaking it down to sizable chunks that you can actually eat? So our goal here is to eat the elephant bite by bite. We create stones, which is what I would call weekly progress. You have your to-dos, and you have your functional activities for the roles that you do every day. So in order to make effort towards the BHAG, you have to break out time in your week. And usually what I say is if you're going to work on rocks that align to your BHAG, you want to have 2 to 4 hours a week per rock that you're working on, moving it forward towards your long-term goals, ultimately up to your actual BHAG. So why would we want to have this aside from the alignment? It's because if we don't set a goal, then we're going to get wherever we are going to go. We don't have any kind of destination. We're just going to spin around in the ocean for a little while. And the idea is by just picking a direction and sticking to the direction, you start rowing in that direction. So it gives the company something to strive for. I like to go through some examples here because when you think about BHAGs, I don't think they're so common. You don't hear companies talking about their BHAGs, but I'm going to give you some real big name examples here of BHAGs that were set by companies. And when you see them, you'll recognize them. A computer on every desk in every home. This was originally the BHAG set for Microsoft. They achieved it. They blew up overnight when it comes to Windows and distribution around consumer computers. Become the Harvard of the West. This one's not totally obvious to a lot of people, but Stanford, that was their BHAG. This one was crushed a long time ago. Every book ever printed in any language, all available in less than 60 seconds. That belongs to Amazon. I'm currently trying to find out what Amazon's current BHAG is, because once they hit this, they set a new BHAG. And that's the way it should be done. If you hit your BHAG, go set a bigger goal, go after it. And then lastly, become the most recognized and respected consumer brand in the world. That would be Starbucks. You know, when you're thinking about a BHAG, I love to share this story that some people know. It's around Ernest Shackleton, who was the Antarctic explorer. So he took out an ad in the classifieds, and it said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, self-return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Ernest Shackleton. So this ad went across the internet. It's been going across the internet for decades now. And when people see this, they get inspired. There are people that read this that say, hell yes, I want to sign up for that. And the same thing could be said today in the modern era with Elon Musk and Twitter. Most people don't want to go work at Twitter. In fact, Twitter lost a lot of people when Elon Musk took over. But Elon Musk made it really clear, we're going to work 16-hour days. You might be sleeping underneath your desk, but you get the opportunity to come here, work with me and work with Twitter. Now, the 20-year-old version of George would have said, yes, sign me up, go do that. The current version, no, not so much. I'm not aligned with Elon Musk's effort. But that's the idea. With a good BHAG, you're setting the state and you're creating a culture. You're setting the values so that everybody knows what they are working on and why they are doing it. Again, another side story to this one, I found out this ad is fake. It was generated for the internet. There's no evidence whatsoever that Shackleton actually took an ad out that looked like this. Zero evidence. I know there's a guy online from England that has a reward out there if anybody can prove that Shackleton actually took out this ad. And so far they haven't. Another person I like to kind of quote here is Viktor Frankl. So he's a Holocaust survivor. Many people know his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And again, what he writes in here, what man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. So it shows at the human level, we need something to strive for. It's no different at a company level. We need something to strive for as a team. That's how people find fulfillment. It also helps you determine who needs to be in your company and who's probably happier at another company because they don't align with where you're going, and that's totally okay. So another BHAG example I like to show here is Red Balloon. This one here that they set by 2030, they want to serve an experience sustainably every second somewhere on Earth. So Red Balloon is out of Australia, and what they actually do is create experiences for people to go do. So like corporate experiences, rather than corporate gifting of products, it's corporate experiences. And they want to serve one every second somewhere on earth. And at that point in 2020, they were serving something like 6 million experiences. So that put them on a pretty good run rate. They were getting about 49, every 49 seconds, they were selling a new experience. So they were well on their way to hit their BHAG, and they would measure it within the office. They had posters everywhere, so they knew exactly what they were aligning for and what they were doing. So this is where I want to get into some more examples here of types of BHAGs. So you'll see here we have Euro. They have a role model BHAG, which is to become the Nike of the cycling industry. They said that in 1986, that they wanted to be the Nike of cycling. I don't know that they're there yet. I don't know enough about them as a company. I know that they're a bigger name brand at this point. They're not on the level of Nike from what I can tell, but they're working towards it. Nike's was set in 1960, which was to crush Adidas. They're still doing it. They're still out there crushing Adidas, and they're working all the time to crush Adidas. You know, I like this BHAG. It feels good. You know, it gets the competitive juices flowing. However, in my mind, it's like maybe they can choose a different competitor at this point. I think they've crushed Adidas. Let's aspire higher. Target-oriented BHAG. This is Walmart's. So become a $125 billion company by 2000. They said that in 1990, that was a 10-year BHAG. They've hit it. I don't know exactly what their valuation is today, but it's definitely above 125 billion. And lastly, a transformational BHAG. In this case, it's Merck. Transformed the company from a chemical manufacturer into a preeminent drug-making company. And this was set in 1930. I would say they probably achieved that by the 80s, a 50-year period. They transformed it from a chemical company to a pharma company, which I didn't know until I dug in a little deeper. So let's get into how we actually think about creating a BHAG. So there's two different models that I like for this. So the first one on the left is called the Play to Win Strategy Cascade. It's by Roger Martin. I think it's a great way to go through and try to create a BHAG statement. So you start with this cascade and then you kind of work back up through it. You ask yourself these questions. Just Google the Play to Win Strategy Cascade and you'll see many, many different ways to find that. But today I'm going to go into this one on the right-hand side. This is actually called a hedgehog. So it was introduced by Jim Collins. The idea of the hedgehog is we're going to look at these three intersecting circles in the Venn diagram. And in the middle, we're going to get to the BHAG. And to do this, I know with scaling up, there's the one-page strategic plan that we can work, and we can look at things like core customer, brand promise, that sort of thing. I personally like to pull from other sets of tools on this one. For passion, I like to go to the golden circle, which was created by Simon Sinek. For the economic engine, I go for profit per X. That's a scaling up idea. And then for brand promise, I go through some different tools that I've learned from a marketing standpoint that work really well for generating a brand promise. So I'm going to take you through each one of these three circles. And then lastly, we're going to go to the BHAG and talk about how they all pull together to form your BHAG. So first, we're going to start with the golden circle. Some of you might be familiar with this. This comes from Simon Sinek's Start With Why. If you've never seen his Start With Why presentation on TED, the video and audio is a little choppy, but it's one of the most watched TED videos of all time. And the idea behind it is that we communicate more effectively from talking from our why rather than what we actually do. So what Sinek was saying is we want to create an emotional connection with our why statement. And what you're looking for is communicating inward from in to out. So in this case, start with why, then go to how, and then go to what you do. So like Apple, for instance, Apple has a why of challenging the status quo. That was their why statement. And how they do it was to create beautifully designed and integrated computer products and services. And then what they do, well, we happen to make an iPhone and a MacBook and a couple other devices. Would you like one? Right? So you're communicating, we're challenging the status quo, we're creating these great products. By the way, there's these products for sale. When you create a conversation that way, it's more engaging emotionally and more likely to attract your customers, right? Or align your team to a why statement, as opposed to Dell. You know, when you went to the Dell website, they just have a bunch of cheap computers and it says for business and for home. They're not communicating anything about why they do what they do or how they do it any better. They just have a bunch of cheap computers, many of them to pick from. They don't resonate with people the way that Apple does. So if we take a look at the full statement, so let's take a look at an example of why, another why statement here. If we take a look at Rackspace, right? So Rackspace, they have a why statement of, we believe in fanatical support. So what I like about Rackspace is they're still around today. They were really big in the early 2000s. They're a hosting company, for those that don't know. They coined this phrase in the 1990s. And when they coined the phrase, the then VP of customer care came in and had a straitjacket and showed it to all the Rackspace employees. They call them rackers. And they said they need to be fanatical with their support for the company. And even to this day, the #1 prize that they give out to their employees each month is a straitjacket. So it's the fanatical jacket award that they give it to the team member that has shown the most fanatical support. That's totally in alignment with their statement, their why statement of, we believe in fanatical support, because they believe that benefits the customer ultimately. And so if you're looking at creating the why statement, what you want to do is, why do you do what you want to do? Create 3 columns on a piece of paper, and left column, write down, why do you do what you do? Again, using Apple as an example, we believe in challenging the status quo. So what is the reason you have created this company, or your team is working on developing the company? Why do you exist? The next piece is, how do you do it differently? In this case, we want to look at, what is it that we're doing in our organization that is different than our competitors, or could be different? Maybe you haven't developed that capacity at this time, but you can develop that capacity. So how are you going to do it different? And then what is it that you're selling to the customer at the end? What is the product? What is the service they're actually buying? So write out the examples of each 3 of these columns. That helps line up to create your golden circle statement. And a great why statement would meet this following criteria. Is it easy for competitors to imitate? In the example of Apple, I would say no. They've spent decades creating a walled garden kind of community where all their tools interact with each other. For someone like a Dell or maybe Amazon, but someone like a Dell or a Samsung, it'd be really tough to kind of crack what Apple has done. It would cause significant pain for them to try to imitate that. Can it be used for a wide variety of products and markets? You want to have yes as the answer to that one. Again, going back to Apple, they started with the computers, they went over to the iPhones, iPods. Now they have a variety of services that are wrapped around it. So they could extend that why statement beyond many things. And does it benefit the end customer experience? Again, that statement should benefit the end customer. It shouldn't be self-serving. So hopefully that takes you through a quick understanding of the golden circle exercise. The next thing we're going to jump into is brand promise, right? With a good brand promise, we're going to focus on the customer needs. And we actually want to have skin in the game. If there is a financial ramification for not living up to your brand promise, then you have skin in the game, and it actually helps you develop trust between your business and your clients or your customers. It also helps drive accountability with the team. It's really what the company is committing to do to the clients. That's the thing you want to highlight. In the case of Rackspace, we'll go back to them. Their brand promise has developed over time. Initially, it was a 0 downtime network. Then it evolved to, we will answer in less than 3 rings. And then it went to, we will fix your hardware in under 4 hours. So this was over the period of years. It kept changing. In fact, in scaling up, there's the story with Rackspace that every time that something would happen on the network, their team, their sales team would actually call the customer up and say, hey, look, we had an outage. We're going to credit your account this month. Sorry about that. This is what we're doing to fix it. So it showed this accountability piece. And also remember, at that time in the industry, sites might go down, and then the client would find out and call the hosting company. In this case, Rackspace was calling their clients to say, we had an outage. What happened here is that as they did that, it gave them a chance to talk to their customers and have a real discussion with the customers, which typically resulted in an increase in revenue, because the salesperson, not the support person, would talk to the customer and then upsell them on some new services that Rackspace offered. So building great trust, great rapport with the customer. There was skin in the game, because if they failed, they had a financial ramification for that. In fact, the sales team joked that if they ever needed to increase revenue, they should just go ahead and take the servers offline for a few seconds or so. Other good examples of brand promises. Geico's is real obvious. 15 minutes or less can save you 15% or more in car insurance. So they have a brand promise that they're going to save you 15% or more on car insurance. So they just want to talk to you 15 minutes of your time. You're going to get 15% savings on your insurance. Pretty cool. BMW is, to me, is a little weaker, and we'll go into why I think it's weaker here in the next slide. But the ultimate driving machine, that's hard to put skin in the game on, right? So it's an aspirational statement, but it's really hard to lock in. Where FedEx used to be, your package will be there overnight guaranteed. So there was a ramification for not being there overnight by 10 a.m. the next day. They've changed it to now relax, it's FedEx, which I think is weaker. But when you're looking at your brand promise, here's 3 good questions that you can ask. What are your customers coming to you for, and what are they buying? What is the need, thinking Maslow's hierarchy of need, that the product or service addresses? And I think this is a key piece. This is why I say the one for BMW is weak. Because when you look at rack spaces, let's go at that again, we'll fix your hardware in under 4 hours, right? That goes down to a safety or a physiological need. Mostly a safety need when it comes to employment. If I work for a company and I'm going to go to Rackspace to host my corporate website, and the site's constantly going down, it's my decision. I'm accountable to that. That looks bad for my employment, and maybe I don't have a job if the site keeps going down. Yet I recommend sticking with Rackspace. So they're filling lower on the pyramid at the safety need when it comes to hosting, right? So the service they're filling to solve the need is hosting. The need is something around safety, employment, feeling trusting with the team that they're doing the work with. That's why with BMW and the ultimate driving machine, that's more of a self-esteem or self-actualization, right? It's more of an ego statement than a need. And then what is the promise statement that you're willing to offer for the customer? So again, can you hook it to some kind of ramification, right? A free or comped X, or a discount, whatever it might be, or money back, whatever it might be. Is there something you can tie to your brand promise that's going to cause some kind of skin in the game trigger to be evoked? Okay, next one we're going to get into, this one's a little bit shorter. This is profit per X, and this really comes from scaling up. Also, Jim Collins come up with the profit per X. But the idea of profit per X is we're going to measure a financial variable, and we're going to look at it to say, if we keep this variable going in this direction, then we know that it's going to align with our rocks, it's going to align with our goals, it's going to bring clarity, it's going to allow us to make the right decision. And in this example I like to give, you got Starbucks, Walgreens, and McDonald's. They're not focused on profit per customer visit. Instead, they are focused on profit per customer visit, not profit per store. Sorry, I have not had enough coffee. But the idea here is it's driving and maximizing the customer visit. It's not looking at how many people can we get into the store today. It's looking at, can we create the maximum number of value for the people coming in the store? So the idea is to bring them in at what they're looking for and then upsell them on a variety of things. And that's why when you look at the metric of profit per X and you get it right, it drives the right results. So other examples, we'll use Rackspace again, since I've been rolling with them. They had profit per recurring revenue client. So again, maximizing the lifetime value of the recurring revenue client, right? Not the one-off transactional client, but ones that stuck with them. How can they grow them over the lifetime? Apple's changed a couple different times. So the ones I have as examples for Apple went from profit per item sold, then it went to profit per customer, and now it's profit per subscription. You'll see that with a lot of Apple's products lately, is they're really driving the subscription model because there's a lot more recurring revenue in that for them. Profit per X. So I would say if you're looking for a profit per X, start with these 3, right? Is it profit per product or service line, whatever you have, profit per customer, profit per employee? If you just start with those 3, play with them and find out, is there a way that we can adjust or tweak one of these so that it becomes the right profit per that's going to generate transformational growth to get you to that BHAG? And again, I have 3 validating questions. Is it measuring the right thing? Because if we're measuring the wrong thing, then it's going to drive us in the wrong direction. So this is not something you're going to come up with one fell swoop, put into place and call it good. You're going to have to keep revisiting it. I find that customers usually take a year or two before they lock into the right profit per X. What's great here is if you already have like a scaling up implemented or 3HAG or traction or any one of those, you have KPIs, right? So bring a profit per X KPI to your monthly meeting so that you're tracking it on multiple fronts. So maybe have 4 or 5 examples of profit per X, and then watch that over time to see if there's a correlation between driving the profit per X and the overall attainment of the goals for the company. So watch it and then start to settle on by filtering out the ones that don't work. Does the number drive massive growth? So if we accelerate this number, this profit per X, is it going to cause us to think transformationally about the business and put the systems in place so that we actually grow quick? Is this measure going to drive differentiation? So again, if we perfect the profit per X and we look at our competitors out there, if we master this one and we drive growth in profit per X, is it going to create a gap between us and the competition? So great questions to ask when you're coming up with a profit per X. So I know I went through those quickly, but if you take all 3 of them, we have the passion from the golden circle, we have the brand promise, what can you be the best in the world at? And we have profit per X coming from driving the economic engine. The intersection of these 3 things is where we want to pull the BHAG from. And again, I know I spoke earlier about the BHAG being this thing that's 25, 20 years out. You can set it 10 years out. But what we want to do is we want to set a date on whatever the BHAG is that we know that we're driving for that particular destination. And then we have our 3 to 5 year thrusts or capabilities that we want to build over that time. We get to our 1 year longer term goal. And then we break that down into a quarter. And then from the quarter, we get into our rocks. So that drives alignment towards the goal, which is the BHAG. And when we're thinking of a BHAG, similar to the previous thing that I did with the brand promise exercises and the start with why, is 3 columns. What are you aspiring to do, right? So we want to talk about what is the aspiration here. I would beg you not to just simply put revenue out there as a goal, because revenue will not get your employees out of bed every day unless you're profit sharing with them. That might give them something to be jazzed about. If we hit this BHAG, then you get a huge payout. But generally, really strong BHAGs have something that's more fulfilling at like an intrinsic level than compensation. So think of something more aspiring. You know, I saw a study by PwC that said 96% of employees believe that they can find high fulfillment at work, right? So again, it doesn't have to be reducing global warming, going to Mars, curing cancer. It can be crush Adidas, right? People get fired up about that. So what is the aspiration that you're going for? And then what is the success criteria? Like in the case of Merck, right? They said they want to become a world's preeminent drug manufacturer. They didn't put a time frame on that as I know, but they got there in 50 years. And that's a big shift from a chemical company to a pharmaceutical company. And then by what date, right? So what is the end goal that we're trying to hit there? Are we trying to get this done in 10 years, 5 years, 15 years? And you know what? We can come back and revise it. I would recommend that once you've set the BHAG and you got buy-in from everybody, don't go back through and revise it. When you're creating the idea and you're ideating on it, revise it for a little while. But then once you set it in and people begin to know it, don't go changing the target on them. So write out your BHAG statement, maybe write out 2 or 3 of them. And then what I like to do is I like to let them marinate with your team. So depending on the size of your organization, let's just say you're a 50-person organization, generate these 3 BHAG statements and put them on a wall, put them in a break room, put them in the kitchen, put them in the hallway, wherever it might be, leave them up there for a week or 2 and encourage your team to use Post-it notes to add comments or questions to each one of the BHAG statements that you've written. And once you've done that, then you're able to go ahead and see if you've actually got a BHAG that the team's actually going to resonate with. So good validation questions here. Is it measurable? Do you find it inspiring? Is it easy to grasp? Do you have less than a 40% chance of achieving it? And will achieving it require a quantum step in the capabilities and characteristics of the organization? So asking yourself these questions will help to validate, do you have a strong BHAG? And then lastly, I like to look at it this way. So once you have that BHAG created, you can see the cascade down effect. So you see out here, you have 10 to 20 years. You have your BHAG, your core values, your core purpose, your core customer. Then you get your 3 to 5 year thrust. You're coming up with your annual plan, your quarterly plan, your weekly plan, your daily plan. So you want to chunk this down. Again, eat the elephant bite by bite. And we want to get down to what are you doing on a daily basis that's moving you incrementally towards your goal of whatever your BHAG is. And that in a nutshell is how to create a BHAG. This is where I would open it up to questions. If you have any feedback, please go to my website and do /feedback. Otherwise, questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. Happy to answer your questions. Anything that you have or any kind of statements that you have.